mean, there's a free version. We can only do like 3 a month, but I decided that I wanted to do,
Actually, could you share it? Could we go half on it? I got 5 on it.
you got 5.
Just,
So yeah, it's about 30 a month, but I made an announcement that like, hey, this is like, I'm not trying to make money on this, but I want to pay for this. But some people donated like $20, so next month's paid for. So that's cool. All right, we're live. So we're joined this hour by Isabel Lopez from what do you do again? Oh yes, Rice Collective in beautiful Santa Rosa, which is the greenest city in America, correct?
One of the most expensive city in America. Yes,
but it's got more trees.
Yes, it's beautiful up here. It's the north, good flowers. It's spring. It's beautiful. I have a really cool yard, so yes, it's everything's blooming. It's beautiful.
Beautiful. So you are the founder of Raíz Collective. Can you tell our audience who might not be aware of all the wonderful work you do, some of the wonderful work you do?
So yeah, it's really a collective situation for sure. And for me, I'm more like of an organizer mostly, aside from like also trying to like write grants and all this stuff. But it came about, see, what happened was like when I was in college and I was recruited by a friend of mine, Chico, who's in Sacramento, into Mecha, right? And so I started, that was just like really transformative for me to be part of like that collective and that movimiento estudiantil at Sac State. And then those mentors were like the RCAF, right? The Royal Chicano Air Force. And so that arts collective did a whole other set of like social justice work during their time. And so they came about, because of the like via the Chicano movement in the late 60s, 70s. And so as students, they like brought ethnic studies into college, and they started organizing and became professors of at Sac State, and then they were like the art fronts of the Chicano movement at the time. They would make silk screening posts. They were just like really super involved. And when you hear stories like that, that's not in you don't learn at school, right? And so it's like my first sort of exposure to social justice work, and them building like community centers, like the Washington Neighborhood Center, and like La Casa Galeria Posada. And when you like hear stories like that, and then there's still like through poetry and through music, they had like Trio Casindio, right? And so I'm sitting there like at 17-year-old. I started college when I was 17. And yeah, and so you would hear like via the song, right? Trio Casindio singing and like, and it's just amazing, like what I'm hearing as a really young person. And I took it all in, but I didn't know, like, come, I graduate, whatever. And I come back, like when I have my kid, back to Santa Rosa in 2007. And at that time was the recession, right? There was no jobs. The only thing I could find was an insurance because they had good benefits. So I stayed there for like 11 years, and they're getting ready to close their offices in California and getting ready to move to like the red states like Texas and Arizona. And I'm like, nope, I'm not leaving California. So that's when I start volunteering for different organizations, mostly nonprofits. And I'm like, wow, like there's not enough art and cultura for a huge reason, right? There's no community centers. There wasn't the culture that I was used to, right? Like, and I just couldn't be commuting to Sacramento. So I was commuting a lot because my daughter was young. And I would go to Soul Collective events a lot because it was really like a safe place for families. And for the music, the culture that I was accustomed to being at Sacramento, right? Way back since the RCAF times, right? And all of us organizing. And so I decided that that I was going to start a nonprofit. And I also didn't see enough women of color like leading and being founders and directors. So and I think it was when I saw Estela, and when I found out that she was the founder, she like is executive director of the Soul, and I really like I could see myself doing it. And it wasn't until I saw someone else doing it, right, that I was like became really empowered and saw myself doing it. So then a bunch of friends from like locally, we were like, oh yeah, well they really were supportive. They chipped in money to submit to for the 501c3. And with mentorship from like another mujer who founded her own organization in Sacramento, Organized Sacramento. She was the one who was like, here's like bylaws, like this is, you don't need to reinvent, make it hard on yourself. And so that's what I did. I submitted it with like the help of everyone, just getting like little bits and pieces of information, Googling a lot, like everything's on Google. And so yeah, that's basically how we started. And in my research, I thought it was going to take like 2 years to get the 501c3, and we got it in like 4 months, which
Wow.
is really crazy for me. And at the time, we didn't have any kind of strategic plan, but it was really like friends who were like, I want to do raíces, I want to do yoga, right? And I want to do it bilingually. And so she was the one like doing her marketing. I would help with promotion and social media, and that's how we started. It was just friends. Like I think Chico was like our very first Noche de Cultura. It was Chico who brought out the escritores del Nuevo Sol in Sacramento. It's like a poet collective. So all these old school folks that were just helped make it come to life, right? Like the veteranos that came out. And like that was the first exhibit was like Chico silk screening, who has been doing like silk screening for different movements throughout since I met him, since like 98 was when we started college, 97. So yeah, so that's how we started, and now here we are, and I'm again like learning how to write grants by just doing it, making it better each time, and yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell our audience a little bit who might not be familiar, particularly a lot of people, most people watching probably in Southern California, about the Soul Collective and the work they do in Sacramento?
Yeah, so they're all about art and activism. So a lot of their programming is really community rooted. So it's by the community for the community, right? And it's comes from that concept of like la cultura cura, right? That like by learning about one's own roots, you become sort of like it is a cura, right? It's like the medicine. And experiencing it and being a witness to it, and not just me, but then when my daughter was when my daughter was born, and I would like we saw like Tribe Called Red, right, which is like these native guys, DJs from Canada, and my daughter was she was like up there on the stage dancing, and it's not normally platforms that like kids of color have. So that's that's a tiny bit of what they do. They do a lot of workshops, like cultural workshops. Yeah. So and I mean, I think Estela's mentor was part of the RCAF. So yeah, so like all of these collectives coming from like these deep roots.
Yeah. So you say that the Soul Collective has been an enormous influence on Rice. So can you tell us some of the workshops and things that Rice has been involved in the past?
I think I've been to like curanderismo workshops there. Like piñata making workshops, like because my kid was young, like 7, 8, so I would take her to partake in some of these things. and and you know they make space for different organizations and to come in and like you know that safe space to organize and again it's like create programs that they want to see that they want to be a part of um, and oh and hugely they own their space right so they collectively are like have a permanent space for community to congregate together to create so yeah so that was when I saw that and I heard that they had managed to um, let's see to buy their space collectively that's what did it for me and so now actually I bought property with my neighbor who's also an artist that works under our collective and Alegria who's like gonna who's facilitated like Raíces yoga for us for a little while and who's also like county deputy chief county council for the supervisors in Sonoma County so that's like there are people that I work with that have multiple identities, that wear multiple hats in the community, and they're still also just like taking on so much responsibility, which also gives me a lot of inspiration and motivation and drive, and courage. So yeah.
So, what type of workshops have has your organization been able to bring to Santa Rosa?
I think I've connected through Soul Collective. Like I think it was a paper mache doll making class a workshop and I connected with Ramona Garcia there. Ramona, and so I brought her out to do paper mache workshops, and then through folks learning about that, like folks have been reached out by like Sonoma State to bring them out to those spaces, to universities, and or we did one in the library, right, and the Sonoma County Library. So that's been super impactful. Is that like there's so much need for it that different spaces are like reaching out to come into their teachers are reaching out for us to come into the classrooms. They want to do projects, they want to do murals. And I think with the budgets right now, like in education specifically, because of the federal leadership that, you know, is cutting down educational budgets. I mean, unfortunately, there's just no, not that we have a ton of money, but like, but we're managing to like make it happen, you know, as a
Yeah.
community. Mm-hmm.
So, no, that's all really fantastic work.
And they're getting paid most importantly, right? They're getting compensated for their time, which is something that like doesn't usually happen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, in the city of Santa Rosa, most people when they think of Santa Rosa, they think of I don't know, they might think of like wine country, or they might think of like Charlie Brown, or Church, Schultz, and all kind of stuff like that. But people don't realize that there is a really large Mexican community in Santa Rosa, and there's definitely a divide from white society, from the white community in the Mesa there, and there's not really a whole lot in terms of, I mean, before what you were doing, there was not a whole lot for the community there, to Santa Rosa City, you'd have to leave to go connect to things. So can you speak to like the kind of the city in general? What do our youth need in Santa Rosa that that you're providing? What are some of the projects to fill that need that you're engaged right now?
Yeah, so I'm reading these questions on this chat, and this is relating to how has the Chicano influence continued and what is the legacy. I think one of the things that I got from learning about RCF's work and like they're doing murals in Southside Park in Sacramento, which are still there, by the way, was that like the city put a highway through some of these open spaces, right? That divided east west, which is similar, it's the same in many different communities, right? And it's true here in Sonoma County, where or Santa Rosa, where like east and west are divided by the 101, the freeway, right? And so on the west side of town, where I grew up, where my parents immigrated from, and they immigrated here because of the farm work, the vineyards and the picking the grapes, right? So they came, my dad and my uncle and my grandpa came from, they moved from Morelos to Hillsburg, specifically for the vineyard work, right? And so it's very obvious to see that the west side of town and those schools are completely underserved, whereas you have and like the redlining was obvious too in terms of like like a lot of districts, right? So each like there's a lot of difference on the districts on the east side of town where you have obviously incomes are higher, and so obviously those schools are getting more money than the schools on the west side. And so yeah, so that's one of the influences. It's like those learnings that I that came about through like when I started the murals, because that's what they did, right? They put the murals there to assert their presence and to like, take up space, and space that like got divided up between east and west and they're taken. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in terms of needs, like there's a lot of needs, right? There's a lot of from leadership, because you know you still have these really conservative white folks in charge of our budgets on these boards that have been there for like decades, and that's very also much generational. Their parents are probably on these boards, or their parents were politicians, and so they know how to run campaigns, and they've lived it, like you know they've seen it with their parents. So that's also really generational. So so there's needs from like, I mean, then you walk around in schools, right? Like for example, Elsie Allen, it's so blank. Like there's no mural. I mean, there's some now, but there's still so much more. Like in a lot of those schools that there's needs. Like so, like right when before this COVID stuff happened, we were getting ready to do a couple murals and finish up some murals. One at Elsie Allen at Hillsburg High and Rancho Picati. So the need is there, but then the funding, you know, like trying to get a hold of this funding is super hard.
Yeah. So I know that you live you're actually really close across the street from this this historic cemetery.
Yes, the rural cemetery, which I didn't even know existed until I moved across the street from it.
And there was a plan to have a Dia de los Muertos party there, right?
Yes,
And what happened?
What happened? See what happened to us. Like so again, we moved here like 2 years ago. It would be 2 years in April exactly, and I think it was like the first week or something. There were a couple weeks into it. We were like, there was like yelling going on and like fighting, and I was like, what is happening? Like literally across the street. And I guess what they were doing is practicing for they have like night programs, or a night where they have like a band and like plays reenacting period times, and it's really freaky because we snuck in there one time and it's $50, so like who, very exclusive, right? So my neighbor Martin was like, we should do this is perfect for the Los Muertos. Like, heck yeah, that's a great idea. Like if they can have like bands and like period time reenactments of like when lynchings were happening, like then why can't we have we totally, I'm sure it would let us have Dia de los Muertos there, right? Mm-hmm. Then my neighbor who like I guess attends some of their volunteer meetings, was like, oh, I'll get you on the agenda. That sounds like a great idea. So my neighbor and we go to the meeting, and I'm literally the only like young brown face in the room. And as soon as as I walk in and I sit down, the older white lady goes, and like not in a nice way, she looks at me, she's like, where are you from? And I was like, I don't even know what to say. Like, am I from? Like, where was I born? Like, where? Yeah. And so I was like, well, I live across the street from I just bought some property across the street from the cemetery. Do you live around the area? And she's like, well, no, but I've been a long time volunteer member of the cemetery. And then she turns around and starts talking to like the lady next to her, and I'm like, okay, this isn't gonna go well. I already have a feeling this is not gonna go. So then my neighbor Martin, he walks a little bit late, but he's an older like man who's like lighter skinned, right? So he kind of like could blend in. Me, on the other hand, there's no way I'm blending in, right?
Yeah.
And so the meeting starts, and I think I'm first, and like I introduce myself, the organization, and my team, and then our idea for the other Los Muertos and a proposal, and everybody just starts going nuts, like, oh, the drinking and the crays are gonna get desecrated, and I'm just like, and then there's this one white man that goes, and you people, he doesn't even look at me, like he just like goes, and you people, and I'm like, did he just say you people? But yeah, so it was like I was like caught in a deer in headlights situation, and I'm not, I and yeah, it was wild like thing to be a witness of, because like that stuff is happening here and now and still, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
I,
county feels like you're almost like going back into the 60s or 70s. Like, this is 2020, huh? Or I think it was 2018, but still, it's wild.
No, I think that the California coast is one of the most racist sections of the country, and people don't even know it. Like most people have no awareness of that. But the stories you're telling about Santa Rosa, you can hear these in San Luis Obispo, you can hear them in Santa Barbara. There's these really, really horrific, like really the very open, blatant, just straight up like like you people type stuff. That goes on the California coast, and everyone's kind of rich, so and supposedly liberal or something. So we pretend like it's not happening, but it's really bad. I mean, that's kind of why I asked you the story, because it's really.
Yeah, and for me, like again, going back to the legacy that we're continuing, like ¿cómo se llama? Oh my god, I'm horrible when I'm like on the spot. Oh my god, the first Latino Chicano mayor in Sacramento, right? ¿Cómo se llama? Help me out, people.
I don't know. Maybe Ben knows.
I was a witness. I like learned too that like, oh, they also were involved in politics and gaining positions of power in that way, right? And like policy making. So for me, like coming back to my community, I'm like, and one of my best friends that I went to junior high with was like, I think I'm gonna run for school board, and I want to unseat this guy who's been on the board for like 20 years, school board, right? And so I was like, yeah, I'll be your campaign man. I totally started going all out to try to figure out how to win. And I think that was his second time running. He didn't win, but then the third time, and this is like aside, this was before the nonprofit started. And so, but he didn't win, but the third time he did win, right? And so he was the first one that was on the school board. And then I think when lawsuits, there was an attorney from down south LA or something that was hitting different counties with lawsuits about redistricting. And so that came to Santa Rosa City Schools, and they redistricted. So because of the redistricting, my niece was able to run for city council in her area. so she was the first representative from her area that really represented the area where she lives on the west side.
Mhm.
And luckily she ran unopposed, so she's on there now. And then my neighbor, Alegria, there was a member that stepped down, so she applied and she got the position. So right now we have 3 really amazing. I mean, I'm sure the other ones are great too, but they're really, I don't know about them, but I know these 3 are really doing some good things on the school board. And then my niece's husband is getting ready to run for city council. So again, because of the redistricting, he's able to run out. And so for me, it's really taking that legacy of like trying to really help people like in places that have decision making powers.
Yeah. Karina says Joe Cerna Jr. is his name. I think that's in reference to
Yeah, Justin, which his son, right? Again, his son is on the city council, I think, in Sacramento.
Okay.
Joe Jr. is the son of Joe Cerna. Google it.
The Cerna dynasty. All right.
Right.
So yeah. So no, that's yeah. I mean, it's great that to hear that. You know, I think it's important to acknowledge both things, both that all the struggles and the things that exist in Santa Rosa that we need to struggle against, and also some of the victories that have been won or the victories that we're working towards winning are happening simultaneously. But I mean, in the time I was in Santa Rosa, some of the things I heard and experienced, I mean, it was like it is kind of like being caught in the time vacuum. Like I you know, like some of when we're at the party and then they were like, you know, who do you know? Why are you? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's like, you know, I walked through a series of bizarre gates to get here. That, but I'm just right over there. You know, like,
Yeah, exactly. Like, who are you?
yeah,
It's terrible. But then the crazy part is that you have people who consider themselves progressive, but it's like they're the worst ones because they're not at all, and they think they're like, yeah. Anyway.
So you mentioned your neighbors, Alegria
And Martin, which you met because you hung out for a little while, helping me
yes,
do some work here.
yes, yes.
So
Oftentimes I pretend like I don't even exist in these interviews. It's a really bizarre thing. I got to tell you, I pretend like I'm like, oh, tell us
remember
more.
that
I have
time?
no memory. I don't remember anything. It's a really bizarre thing, but it works better that way. So you tell the story, not me. So that otherwise I would just put a Facebook Live. I'm like, let me tell you a story. I was in Santa Barbara. Anyway, so your backyard, your shared backyard with you, Alegria, and Martin.
That's a collective situation as well, right? Like me being a single mother, Alegria being the main like breadwinner in her home for her family. So like and she comes from deep roots as well, right? Like her parents were UFW organizers, and she was born in La Paz, right? So she comes from like that kind of community where everyone shares stuff, right? Like everyone's living there, everybody's getting like $5 a week or something like ridiculous. I don't know, but they were happy. She grew up like a happy childhood, which is same like me, right? I come from a family of 6 sisters and a brother, huge family. So it was like either I everyone gets it or no one gets it, right? It's just like that's fair, and that's how we survive, right? Like hand me downs, and there's nothing wrong with it, and actually it's very like way more sustainable. What do you know? Instead of like consuming all kinds of crap, and so again, coming from similar value systems, it just made sense for us to combine our money to, collectively buy this place so we don't get displaced. And so I think that's also part of like the cool part about collectives, at least the ones that I'm connected to, is that like they're really living that example of what that is, right?
Yeah. So in the backyard, do you throw a lot of like events and parties and fundraisers and
Because where else? These people won't even let me in the cemetery. How else? They're like, I don't know. Too much drinking. I was like, dude, do you even know Halloween down the street? You guys have like crazy. So I live down the street, for those people who don't know Sonoma County. Like, I live in the street where, like, literally down the street is like the historic district. You have these huge houses, and like they throw major Halloween parties, and everybody's like out drinking and blah blah blah. So I'm like, down the street, these people are down the street drinking and partying. Like, I think like my neighbor was like, they're confusing Halloween with Dia de los Muertos, right? Like, Dia de los Muertos for us was about like gathering at the cemetery and like literally being in community with our dead, like whatever that means, right? Just being so whatever.
Well, I've been.
I try to make this, like everybody come over,
Well, having walked through the cemetery, I saw a lot of beer cans and all kinds of other. So I don't know who was drinking out there, but like I also saw a grave in the cemetery that apparently there was a white guy in the 1800s who discovered corn. Can you talk about this? The white man in San Rosa who discovered corn?
I doubt, sir, that in 1860, no, I think corn was around, like hybrid corn was around way before you came to. He Columbused it. He Columbused the hybrid corn situation.
I gotta admit, that was a pretty shocking claim to see a gravestone.
I think you were taking a picture. I'm like, yes, that's
a
good picture. Because that's a ridiculous claim.
Yeah. Maybe like inventing corn syrup or something like that. He's responsible for like he's personally responsible for diabetes. Maybe that's his true. I don't know, but
figured it out.
Yeah, 18. He like lived from 1835 to 1870 or something. I don't know. 18.
Right.
That doesn't seem
doesn't add up, right? But that's again, like in terms of our education system, they start teaching you history, like with how the U.S. came about. Like, what? 200 years of history? That's it? Like, right? So when I started like hearing these stories from these folks, I'm like, oh my God, like, especially like my professor from Sac State in art, Estefavela, he was like always like throwing drops of knowledge on like where we come from, and like be like, look at your beautiful like skin, and he would like put me on a platform and be like, draw her to the art class, and I'm like, wow, like I never felt so empowered in my life, till I was in his class, and he was just like, look at her beautiful Aztec, and I was like, wow, yes, look at her beautiful Aztec self. I don't know what he was saying, but he's like crazy. He's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So it's Raíces promotes the arts, it promotes all kinds of cultural events, but in many ways, that's what it is like, on paper, but like in many ways it's really a form of popular education. I mean, you're really taking, the education that we probably should get in the classroom, and you're making it, part of the public sphere and the public whatever. So what do you think what do you think is the responsibility of the artists in times in our times? I mean, what should they be doing? What should they be talking about?
Well, you have like this whole like art for art's sake, and then for me, like I never connected with, because I here in Sonoma County, right? I grew up around here, never connected to art until again, right? You go to Sac State, and I become involved in Mecha, and I become involved in this like movimiento, and I see how powerful it is, right? I see the images. And so I think like for me, just because of like where I come from and my experiences, I think like the um, the artist is just to speak truth to power via whatever, whether that be visually or via the spoken word or via writing or like um I think that's what it is, to speak truth to power. Hmm. And really spark change.
Yeah.
People into like doing something, into taking action.
So in that vein, you recently organized a kind of a virtual what was it, parking lot post?
Yeah, one of my friends was like, "We should. This is what we should name it because like we're even if we're in the parking lot, we're still going to be doing it." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, let's parking lot poets, sure." So he was kind of like the person who came up with that concept. Shout outs to Juan, who is also like one of our very first board members. Um, and so that was like, it was like 43 people, for something like that, that connected, zoomed in, and it was amazing because it there was folks in there from like Zamora, Michoacan, una mujer from Zamora, and I was like, wow, she's like, that's the power. Even though we're trying to, we love face to face things, but that was the power of like technology right now, is that it's connecting people across borders, which is really, for me, it was really powerful it was exciting to have that space where people are just like sharing, their truth via the spoken word, and it was amazing. And you were one of them. What did you think of? You were like the last one, and so we're doing another one. We'll make you
Yeah,
this time?
sure.
Can you be
Yeah,
on it? Okay.
yeah, cool. It's always interesting going last because oftentimes people want to save me for last because there's this idea, I think, that I'm very explosive or something like that, and it's a great way to close the show. But
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes when the story, when the open mic is it's a packed list, it ends up by go on, and there's like 5 people left, and I'm like not being egotistical or anything, but I think sometimes because I'm supposed to be a highlight, and they wait till I go to the end, but the show's like an hour and a half longer than it should be, and so by the time I'm on, everyone's like wanting it to be over. So that time.
So these are learnings. This is everyone's first time, right? Like we don't have pandemics like ever, so I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, I didn't even set up the Zoom thing, right? Like I didn't do any of it. I just like connected everyone together. So that's the cool part about collectives too, is like everybody has their skill sets that they bring in to help it make it happen. But this time we can put you first. How about that on Thursday? Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
You're right. Like, if I failed at life that day, I was like, oh, that probably that, and we went way over too. Like
it's fine. I'm
hour over or something.
I like
Everybody
that.
was like,
no, I enjoyed hearing everybody. It's okay. But I kind of get the sense that the reason people want me to go on last is that, and if the it's the one it's happened before. Let's just put it that way. Like, so that's what I kind of thought. But no, overall it was great. It was great. We're all getting used to it. I think the question I really want to ask is that since you have this organization that is going to be continuing after the pandemic's over, are there things you're doing right now in the midst of the pandemic that you intend to continue to do because like you said, with the internet, distance doesn't really matter, so you can reach people from all over the world.
mm-hmm. No, for sure. So we were getting ready to do, again, like we're already in schools, like getting ready to do murals. So that's going to continue. The work of like bringing art to schools is still on the list. We still have projects to finish. We were in the middle of projects that we got grants for that aren't completed. One of them being the Youth Environmental Artivist Summit, which is the seed of another friend of mine that's the project coordinator of that. And she's like such a badass organizer. Shout out to April. And so it's that's at Pomo Canyon. And so again, I bring different folks working for different organizations, and it's really art and or environmental, not from like the Western, like, white lens, Anglo lens. And so my friend who's Pomo, Ross, shout out to Ross, was gonna be a part of it, and like many other folks were gonna be a part of it. But so that was scheduled for May. Obviously, it's not gonna happen. So that's still we want to do that camp out yearly, and that's high school kids. We still want to do the poetry series. Those are like we try to make those happen quarterly. Sometimes it doesn't, but we try. What else? Continuing to come into institutions who don't have that the art available to them. Right.
So we got a compliment. We got a compliment, a question, and then services being offered.
How do you?
Huh?
I don't see that. How come you see it?
I don't know.
Then I can't.
Life's not fair. I don't know you. All right. So you got a nice ring to it in response to parking lot poets. Then he's asking, do you need a logo?
So if you go to collective.org, I was gonna type it in, but I couldn't. I don't have that option to chat with you guys, which sucks. Can you work on that? Thanks.
Right now. And then keywords marketing. He's telling you. So this is from Mike Bravo. Mike Bravo is actually organizer and a web designer and.
Wow! Yeah, I would love like a redesign of the logo. Sure, I'm like, yes, the more the merrier. That's the way I'm like, yeah, let's do it.
No, Mike comes highly recommended. Highly recommended.
Really?
Yeah.
Where is he from? Mike, where are you from?
Mike, where are you from? Let's see if he answers. See if he's still there. If not, I'll answer for him.
Okay.
Mike's from Venice, California.
Then in LA. Cool. Yeah, I'm down.
So he's a organizer against gentrification as well as a graphic artist, graffiti artist thing too. So he's done a lot of things. Mike's kind of a Venice legend. So.
Oh, I love meeting people and like knowing what they do, because like you have some of the quietest folks that are doing crazy things, and you're like, wow, I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, definitely.
I love curiosity. Yeah. So that's what art does too, right? It makes you like creative and curious and a critical thinker, most importantly, which I am shocked every day sometimes at the people that I talk to. I'm like, really? You never thought of this? But yeah.
You get shocked both one way and the other. I get it. Like the world is full of shocking things. So any final words? Anything that people need to check out and like ways to support?
Yeah. So Facebook for me is like the easiest way to market. I don't know how to edit. I don't have time to edit like websites. So Facebook is the best way to see what we're up to, because I post everything on social media because it's the easiest, fastest. Yep. And yeah, so tune in to any events. We're doing, again, like a parking lot poetry series or event on Thursday. So that's in honor of La Madre Tierra, right? Pachamama. And so anyone that wants to share music or words or poetry or stories could hit me up at ricecollective@gmail.com, and I can put you on the list to read. I think right now we have about 5 or 6. Not mad. I'll put him on the list even though he hasn't emailed me. But yeah, we have just really cool people. Some that I haven't even heard and I just met through like Instagram. And so that's always like such a treat or an honor if people invite others. And then that's how I met Josiah. one of, I don't know if he's, I don't know.
Just Aldrete?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, that was the first time that I heard him, and I was like, wow, he's great. So I love like when stuff like that happens, like when I get to hear like new amazing, like I'm always juiced to hear anything really. I'm such a nerd. So I geek out over everything.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to be reading I just got this today.
Yeah.
So it's like perfect timing, came in perfect for quarantine read.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you for plugging the book, and I appreciate you for all you do for so many artists. I mean, like you really are a huge. I mean, I don't know. It's an art all its own. Being promoter, a platformer, and all that you do, and it's really important work, and I'm glad you're doing it, not me, because I would be terrible at it.
That's what happens when you have like purpose, like
Yeah.
This is my purpose, just to bring people together and fund it somehow.
All right, Isabel, it's been a blast. I will see you around.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.